Guess who's coming to dinner? All your neighbors. And you're the main course. Zombies. Flesh-eating, gut-munching, garden-variety zombies. No matter how many times you kill them, they keep coming back for more, don't you? More than any other master, George A. Romero used these flesh-eaters as the genesis for bringing horror closer to home and gave it a face we all recognize. Ourselves.
Well, I grew up on EC comic books, and actually when I was first of an age to be allowed to go to movies alone, the Universal monsters were all in re-release, so I got to see Frank and Drac and those cats big screen as a kid. I can't even imagine that I created, a creature of any kind. I don't see it that way. I mean, they're zombies. They just happen to, be white. They don't work in a cotton plantation. They're blue-collar monsters.
George Romero was a big influence on me because of, I think, Night of the Living Dead. That was a transforming film. Like Psycho, I think, is the beginning of the modern horror movie. Up to then, you had Universal horrors, and you had a lot of Hammer movies, but Psycho came along, and bango, everything changed. And then George transformed it once again in 1968, 69 with Night of the Living Dead. That was an amazing film. He invented a whole world.
Originally, we set out to make this a very high-minded, almost Bergman-esque kind of film, which was not my vote, but this was a democracy. But we could never sell tickets to that movie, to investors who would actually pony up a few bucks. So we decided to do a horror thing. I always wanted to do it. And then of course, after Night of the Living Dead became Night of the Living Dead, I fled. I said, oh, man, I'm going to get stuck here. And even though I love it, I didn't want to be stuck there. So the next couple of things I did were not, all the way flat-out horror things. The second one was a romantic comedy.
Romero, most of the time, is doing social commentary, and I think his Living Dead movies are fantastic commentaries about society.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes.
With the original Night, it was late 60s. We were all involved in, in social criticism of one kind or another. And so I think those attitudes all crept in. We lived in that farmhouse. We would hang around at night. It definitely crept in, and we talked a lot about what does this represent, and the fact that it was purely an accident that the lead role was cast with a black actor, who happened to be a friend of ours, who was the best actor available to us. That gave it some power, which, it didn't go unrecognized by us, but we were out to make a horror movie. I think, probably the first story that ever told was a scary story. And so often they're parables, and they have deeper meanings, and and so we were somewhat aware of it in the first film. In Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, it was much more conscious, and therefore I think is much less innocent. In fact, it's that lack of innocence, I think, that if anything bothers me about those films. Once you're aware of it, it's pretty hard to put it in the back of your mind and work the story solely for its own.
When I was working on Reanimator, George Romero's zombies are like, this is sort of the, he is the, the guy who kind of established how a zombie behaves. You can't think of zombies without thinking of George Romero zombies.
By the time we made Day, everybody in the world wanted to be zombies. And the dean of the fine arts department at Carnegie Mellon University is the zombie there with his wife. He's the fisherman zombie. People just all want to be zombies, and they all want to have the most grotesque makeup, and they want to be chewed up if possible. And it's a riot.
I won the Saturn Award for Day of the Dead. That's the only award I've ever won for special effects because of the realism of it.
I didn't feel a need to top the last one with the gore. We were better able to execute the stuff. Tom had learned, and the cats knew how to do it. They'd mixed up some blood that looked a little more real.
You can't get any better than the real thing. All the intestines were real because you can't get any better than the real thing,
I think we were all learning, and gradually we're able to improve the effects. Tom came up with some really ingenious effects in Day.
God, there's so much in Day of the Dead. That was a heavy effects film. We shot, killed, squibbed, tore heads off, crushed heads with 2x4s.
Left to my own devices, I probably, if it was totally a decision based entirely on aesthetics, I might have gone less, particularly in Day. But I had this vague notion that it was like a wake-up call. People are running from the theater, and those of us like you and I who are diehards are sitting there giggling, wanting more. Do it to me. So
I love George's Dead movies. He struggles with how the Hollywood system doesn't trust it and hates it. And I feel bad because I was the one who encouraged him to come here. I said, they're not so bad. He came here and said, yes, they are.
Well, I think a lot of people don't get what I do sometimes. I don't know that it's a misinterpretation, because they're looking at it. A distribution executive is going to look at a film with completely different eyes than a member of the audience, or than you or I, or a filmmaker particularly. They're looking for, they want to watch the movie and be able to imagine the poster instantly in their minds. And if they can't see the poster, then how am I going to sell this piece of shit? And that's happened to me a lot. When I was trying to pitch the new zombie film, they said, "What's it about?" And I went in and I would say, "Well, it's about ignoring the problem." And they would say, "Yeah, but what's the story? What are the characters?" And I'd say, "Well, you can do it 50 different ways, They don't want to hear that. And basically it's about ignoring the problem, which I don't know that anybody is doing after September 11th. We're starting to ignore the problem again. I had this conceit that the first one was 60s, the next one was 70s, next one was 80s, and I wanted to do one for the 90s. And really the script that I wrote is more 90s than certainly pre-September 11. And so I feel I have time, to absorb what the new millennium brings us, or the new decade brings.